When Sierra's Thai takeout ends up at a billionaire's mansion, she just wants her dinner back. Not a seat at Dominic Voss's candlelit table, but one misdelivered meal may change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. Sierra Bennett closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. The headache that started during her morning shift at Pine Valley Veterinary Clinic had only gotten worse during the afternoon. 12 hours on her feet, 3 emergency cases, and a pack of anxious pet owners had drained every ounce of energy from her body. "You should go home," said Nancy, the clinic's receptionist, her grey hair pulled back in a practical bun. "You look dead on your feet." Sierra managed a weak smile. "Just one more patient. Mrs. Henderson's bringing in her cat for vaccinations. I told her you had to leave. Dr. Martin can handle it," Nancy said firmly, her motherly tone leaving no room for argument. "Now go. Get some rest." 20 minutes later, Sierra climbed into her old Honda Civic. The check engine light had been on for weeks, but her last paycheck had gone to rent and student loans. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the granola bar she'd wolfed down at 10 a.m. Thai food. She mumbled to herself as she pulled out her phone. "I deserve some comfort food tonight." She tapped open the delivery app and placed her usual order from Bangkok Kitchen: pad thai with extra peanuts, spring rolls, and mango sticky rice. The app remembered her preferences, which was a small blessing when her brain felt like mush. Sierra hit order and dropped her phone onto the passenger seat. The drive to her small apartment took 15 minutes. She lived in a modest complex on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, but it allowed pets, which meant everything to her. As she parked and trudged up the stairs to her second-floor unit, Sierra's only thoughts were of a hot shower and her couch, and Kira, her rescue greyhound, greeted her at the door with a wagging tail and excited whine. "Hey girl," Sierra said, kneeling down to pet the dog. "Miss me? We'll go for a walk after dinner, I promise." Sierra showered quickly, changed into her most comfortable sweatpants and a faded t-shirt from college, and settled onto her couch. She checked her phone for the delivery notification. Nothing yet. 45 minutes passed. Her stomach growled louder. "That's weird," she muttered, opening the app to check the status. The order had been delivered 20 minutes ago. "What?" Sierra sat up straight. "That can't be right." She checked the delivery address and her heart sank. The app had somehow reverted to her old delivery address, the Voss estate, where she'd worked as a temporary housekeeper for 3 months 2 years ago when she was desperate for extra cash to cover an emergency vet bill for Kira. "No, no, no," she groaned, dropping her head into her hands. The Voss estate was the largest private residence in Pine Valley, a sprawling mansion set behind iron gates and a long, winding driveway. It belonged to Dominic Voss, the notoriously private CEO of Voss Technologies. Sierra had only seen him a handful of times during her brief employment there. He'd barely acknowledged her existence. Sierra considered her options. She could order again, but that would mean spending money she didn't have. She could call the restaurant and explain the mistake, but would they really send a driver to retrieve the food and bring it to her? "I guess I'm going hungry tonight," she sighed. Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was from her banking app. A payment had been processed to her account from Voss Technologies. Sierra frowned and opened the notification. There it was, a transfer for $75 with a note, reimbursement for food delivery. "What?" she whispered. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a text message from an unknown number. "Your food was delivered to my house. I've reimbursed you, so you can order again." Dominic Voss. Sierra stared at her phone in disbelief. How did he get her number? Why would a billionaire bother with returning money for a takeout order? Before she could process this, another text came through. "Unless you'd like to come pick it up. It's still here." Sierra bit her lip. The idea of driving all the way to the Voss estate just for takeout seemed ridiculous, but something about the text messages intrigued her, and honestly, she was starving. "I'll be there in 20 minutes to pick it up." "Sorry for the mix-up," she texted back before she could overthink. Sierra quickly changed into jeans and a clean sweater, ran a brush through her dark hair, and applied a swipe of lip gloss. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, she told herself. It was just common courtesy not to show up looking like she'd just rolled out of bed. "I'll be back soon, Kira," she promised, giving the dog a quick pat before grabbing her keys. The drive to the Voss estate took her through the wealthiest neighborhood in Pine Valley. Massive homes sat on expansive, perfectly manicured lawns. Sierra felt out of place as her old Honda chugged along the pristine streets. When she reached the imposing gates of the Voss estate, she hesitated. What was she doing here? This was crazy. She was about to turn around when the gates slowly began to open. Sierra cautiously drove through and followed the long driveway to the main house. The mansion was even more impressive than she remembered. A modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone that probably cost more than she'd earned in several lifetimes. She parked in front of the house and took a deep breath. This is just about the food, she reminded herself. Get in, get out, go home. As Sierra approached the front door, it swung open before she could knock. A security guard she didn't recognize stood there. "Miss Bennett?" he asked formally. Sierra nodded, surprised he knew her name. "You're expected," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Mr. Voss is in the dining room." Sierra followed him through the grand foyer, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The house was exactly as she remembered, immaculate, expensive, and strangely empty feeling despite all the luxury. The security guard led her to a set of double doors and opened them, then discreetly disappeared. Sierra stepped into the dining room and froze. Dominic Voss stood at the head of a long table that was set for 2 people. Candles flickered in elegant silver holders. Her takeout food had been carefully plated on fine china. A bottle of wine sat open, breathing. Dominic looked exactly as Sierra remembered, only more human somehow. His dark hair was slightly tousled rather than perfectly styled. He wore a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up instead of one of his famous tailored suits. His expression was calm, but there was something in his eyes that caught her off guard, a vulnerability she'd never noticed before. "You came," he said simply. Sierra stood awkwardly in the doorway. Yes, I'm so sorry about the mix-up with the delivery. I used to work here, and the app must have saved the address." "I remember," Dominic said. Sierra blinked in surprise. "You do?" A small smile touched his lips. "You rearranged my bookshelves by color instead of by author. It took me weeks to find anything." Heat rushed to Sierra's cheeks. "I'm sorry about that. It was my first week and I thought it would look more organized." "It did," he admitted. "Just not very practical." An awkward silence fell between them. "I should just take the food and go," Sierra said finally, gesturing to the table. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "I didn't want to eat alone," Dominic said quietly. "I hoped you'd come." The simple honesty in his voice caught her off guard. "Please," he continued, gesturing to the chair opposite his, "join me. Unless you have other plans." Sierra knew she should make an excuse and leave. This was bizarre. People like Dominic Voss didn't have dinner with people like her. But something in his expression, a flicker of what almost looked like hope, made her hesitate. "No other plans," she found herself saying. "Just my dog waiting for a walk." "You have a dog?" Dominic asked as he pulled out the chair for her. Sierra nodded as she sat down. "A greyhound, Kira. I rescued her from the track 2 years ago." "I like dogs," Dominic said, taking his own seat. "Never had one, though." "Why not?" Sierra asked before she could stop herself. Dominic's expression clouded. "Briefly, my father was allergic, and after that, I traveled too much, I suppose." Sierra nodded, suddenly remembering her place. "Of course. I'm sure you're very busy." Dominic poured wine into both their glasses. "Not too busy for dinner," he said. Sierra took a sip of the wine, which probably cost more than her monthly rent, and tried to think of something to say. This was the strangest situation she'd ever found herself in. "How is the clinic?" Dominic asked unexpectedly. Sierra's eyebrows shot. "So you know I work at a vet clinic?" Dominic looked slightly embarrassed. "I remember overhearing you on the phone once talking about an emergency with a cat. You seemed very passionate about it." "I am," Sierra admitted, relaxing slightly. "I love my job. It's exhausting and sometimes heartbreaking, but helping animals is all I've ever wanted to do." "That's rare," Dominic said. a note of admiration in his voice. Knowing exactly what you want. Sierra took a bite of her pad thai, which somehow tasted even better on fine china. What about you? Running a tech empire must be exciting. A shadow crossed Dominic's face. It's what I was raised to do. But not what you want, Sierra asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Dominic looked startled, as if no one had ever asked him that question before. I don't know, he said finally. I've never really thought about it. Sierra found that sad, but didn't say so. Instead, she asked, what would you do if you could do anything? Dominic considered this as he took a sip of wine. Travel, he said finally. Not for business, just see places, real places. Not the inside of conference rooms and hotels. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Sierra told him about the 3 puppies that had been brought into the clinic that morning, abandoned in a box outside the door. Dominic listened, asking thoughtful questions, seeming genuinely interested. Sierra found herself laughing as she told him about Mrs. Peterson's parrot that had learned to perfectly mimic the smoke alarm. You have a nice laugh, Dominic said suddenly. Sierra felt her cheeks warm. Thank you, she said, suddenly self-conscious. I don't hear much laughter in this house, he added, glancing around the impressive room. It's refreshing. As they finished eating, Sierra realized with surprise that almost 2 hours had passed. The conversation had been so natural, so unexpectedly comfortable that she'd lost track of time. I should go, she said reluctantly. Kira will be crossing her legs by now. Dominic nodded, standing as she did. Of course. He walked her to the door, a respectful distance between them. Thank you for dinner, Sierra said, and for not being angry about the delivery mix-up. Thank you for coming, Dominic replied. It was nice. There was something in the way he said nice, as if he wasn't accustomed to things being simply pleasant, that tugged at Sierra's heart. Good night, Mr. Voss, she said, turning to leave. Dominic, he corrected her softly. Please, Sierra smiled. Good night, Dominic. As she drove home, Sierra tried to make sense of the evening. It had been surreal, having dinner with one of the richest men in the state, in his mansion, eating her takeout on china that probably cost more than her car. But what stuck with her wasn't the luxury or the wealth. It was the look in Dominic's eyes when she'd laughed, like he was witnessing something precious and rare. When Sierra arrived home, Kira greeted her with excited jumps and tail wags. You'll never believe the night I had, girl, Sierra told the dog as she clipped on her leash for their walk. As they strolled through her modest neighborhood, Sierra's phone buzzed with a text message. Thai food again next week? I'll make sure. It delivered to the right address this time. Sierra stopped walking, staring at the message from Dominic Voss. Was he asking her out? Or was this just a polite gesture from a lonely rich man? She thought about his quiet confession that he didn't hear much laughter in his house, about the way he'd seemed genuinely interested in her stories about the clinic, about the flicker of something unguarded she'd seen in his eyes. Before she could overthink it, Sierra typed a response, only if you let me bring dessert. I make a mean apple pie. The reply came almost instantly, deal. Sierra smiled as she continued her walk with Kira. Whatever this was, and she wasn't sure yet, it felt like the beginning of something unexpected, something that made her heart beat a little faster. What do you think, Kira? She asked the dog. Should we give the billionaire a chance? Kira looked up at her with trusting eyes and wagged her tail, which Sierra chose to take as approval. As Sierra fell asleep that night, she found herself looking forward to next week in a way she hadn't anticipated anything in a long time. The thought should have scared her, but instead it felt like the first page of a new story, a story she was suddenly very curious to read. The week crawled by at an agonizing pace. Sierra found herself checking her phone more often than usual, wondering if Dominic would cancel their dinner plans. Men like him were busy, important. They didn't have time for impromptu dinners with veterinary assistants. You're distracted, Nancy commented on Friday afternoon as Sierra accidentally knocked over a container of cotton balls. Something on your mind? Sierra quickly gathered the scattered cotton balls. Just tired, she lied. Nancy raised an eyebrow but didn't press. The issue. Don't forget we have the adoption event tomorrow. Those 3 puppies need homes. I'll be there, Sierra promised, her thoughts drifting to the puppies they'd rescued last week. They'd grown stronger under her care, their playful personalities emerging. Finding them good homes was her priority. As her shift ended, Sierra's phone buzzed with a text. "Still on for tonight? 7 p.m.? Dominic's message was simple and direct. Sierra smiled despite herself. "Yes, I'll bring the pie as promised." At home, Sierra changed 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. It was nothing fancy, but it made her feel pretty. She told herself it didn't matter what she wore, this wasn't a date, just 2 people sharing a meal. As she carefully placed her homemade apple pie in a container, Sierra's phone rang. It was her foster sister, Marissa. "Hey, what's up?" Sierra asked, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she gathered her things. "Just checking in," Marissa said. "We missed you at dinner last Sunday. Linda asked about you." Sierra felt a pang of guilt. Linda had been their foster mother for 5 years, the only stable home they'd known as teenagers. Sunday dinners at her house were a tradition. "I'm sorry, work was crazy," Sierra said. "I'll be there this week, I promise." "You better be," Marissa teased. "So what are you up to tonight? Want to grab a movie?" Sierra hesitated. "Actually, I have plans." "Plans? Like a date?" Marissa's voice rose with interest. "Not a date," Sierra said quickly. "Just dinner with a friend." "A friend? Since when do you have friends I don't know about?" Sierra laughed. "I do have a life outside of you and the clinic, you know." "Barely," Marissa said. "Fine, keep your secrets, but I want details tomorrow." After hanging up, Sierra felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. What was she doing? This wasn't her world. Men like Dominic Voss dated supermodels and socialites, not ordinary women with rescue dogs and student loans. As Sierra drove to the Voss estate, her mind filled with doubts. But when the gates opened and she saw Dominic waiting for her at the front door, something inside her calmed. He wore casual clothes again, dark jeans and a simple grey sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but somehow made him look approachable. His face brightened when he saw her, a genuine smile replacing his usual serious expression. "You came," he said, just as he had the week before. Sierra smiled, handing him the pie. "I promised dessert." This time dinner was set up on the terrace, overlooking the gardens. Thai food again, but from a different restaurant, one Sierra had mentioned as her second favorite during their last conversation. The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail touched her. "How was your week?" Dominic asked as they settled into their seats. Sierra told him about the puppies, about a difficult surgery she'd assisted with, about the adoption event planned for the next day. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. "What about you?" she asked. "How's the world of high-tech business?" A shadow crossed Dominic's face. "Complicated. We're negotiating a merger that's challenging." "You don't seem happy about it," Sierra observed. Dominic looked surprised by her perception. "It's a good business move. My board is pushing for terrace, but," Sierra prompted. Dominic was quiet for a moment. "But it means laying off about 200 employees from the smaller company, people with families, lives." He sighed. "My father would have done it without a second thought. Profit, above all." "And you're not your father," Sierra said softly. Dominic's eyes met hers, filled with something that looked like gratitude. "No, I'm not. Though sometimes I wonder if that's a weakness in my position." "Caring about people isn't a weakness," Sierra said firmly. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Tell me about growing up," Dominic said suddenly. "Your family." Sierra tensed slightly. This wasn't territory she typically ventured into with people she barely knew. But something about Dominic's direct question, the genuine interest in his eyes, made her answer honestly. "I don't have a family. Not a traditional one anyway," she said. "I grew up in foster care. My mother died when I was 7, and my father, well, he wasn't in the picture." Dominic's expression softened. "I'm sorry," Sierra shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I was luckier than most. I had a good foster mother for my high school years, Linda. She took in me and 3 other girls. She's the closest thing to a mother I have." "And you still see her?" Dominic asked. Sierra nodded. Sunday dinners. It's our tradition. That sounds nice, Dominic said, a note of wistfulness in his voice. What about you? Sierra asked. Your family. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly. My parents divorced when I was 12. It was messy. My father was a powerful man who wasn't used to losing, and my mother wanted her freedom more than anything. I became a pawn in their game. That must have been hard, Sierra said. It taught me that people always want something. From you, Dominic said matter-of-factly. My father wanted me to be his heir, to carry on the Voss legacy. My mother wanted child support and the social status of being Alexander Voss's ex-wife. The bitterness in his voice was subtle, but unmistakable. Not. Everyone wants something from you, Sierra said gently. Dominic's eyes met hers. What do you want, Sierra? The directness of his question caught her off guard. From you, nothing, she smiled, except maybe to try a piece of my pie. Something in Dominic's expression relaxed, as if her answer had satisfied a question he'd been afraid to ask. After dinner, they moved to a sitting area with comfortable outdoor furniture. Sierra served her apple pie, watching nervously as Dominic took his first bite. His eyes widened. This is incredible, Sierra beamed. My Foster. Mom's recipe. The secret is cardamom in the crust. I don't think I've ever had homemade pie before, Dominic admitted. Never? Sierra was shocked. Dominic shook his head. We always had a chef. Everything was professional and lacking in love, Sierra said without thinking. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said finally. Exactly that. As the evening cooled, Dominic brought out a soft throw blanket for Sierra. The gesture was small but thoughtful. They talked about books they'd read, movies they'd seen, places they'd like to visit someday. Sierra was surprised to discover they shared a love for old black and white films and historical documentaries. Not many people know that about me, Dominic admitted. It doesn't fit with the tech CEO image. Is that important? The image? Sierra asked. Dominic considered this. It used to be. My father was obsessed with appearances. The right clothes, the right car, the right woman on his arm. And you? I thought it mattered, he said. Until recently. His eyes held hers, and Sierra felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket around her shoulders. When it was time for her to leave, Dominic walked her to her car. Next Friday, he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that seemed at odds with his powerful public persona. Sierra smiled. My turn to host, she said impulsively. My place isn't anything like this, but I make a mean lasagna. Dominic looked surprised. You don't have to. I want to, Sierra interrupted, unless you're afraid to be seen in my part of town. A challenge sparkled in her eyes, and Dominic smiled in response. I'll bring the wine. The next evening, after a successful adoption event where all 3 puppies found homes, Sierra received a text from Dominic. How did it go today? Sierra smiled, touched that he'd remembered. She sent him a picture of the last puppy with his new family, a young couple with a little girl whose smile was as big as her face. Perfect match, she texted. You must be good at finding those, came his reply. Sierra wasn't sure what to make of that, but it made her smile anyway. The next week passed quickly. Sierra found herself looking forward to Friday, with an anticipation that both excited and alarmed her. This was dangerous territory. Men like Dominic didn't end up with women like her. This wasn't a fairy tale. Yet she cleaned her small apartment, thoroughly bought fresh flowers for the table, and spent hours making her grandmother's lasagna recipe from scratch. At exactly 7, there was a knock at her door. Sierra took a deep breath and opened it. Dominic stood there, looking slightly out of place in her modest apartment building hallway, but somehow more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He held a bottle of wine in one hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers in the other. I wasn't sure what to bring, he admitted. Wine seemed obvious, but the flowers made me think of you. Sierra took the flowers, touched by the gesture. They're beautiful. Thank you. As Dominic stepped into her apartment, Sierra watched him take in her modest living space, the second-hand furniture, the bookcases made from crates, the colorful throw pillows that brightened the old couch. It's not much, she said suddenly. Self-conscious, it's perfect, Dominic replied, his eyes warm. It feels like a home. Before Sierra could respond, Kira came bounding into the room, her tail wagging excitedly at the visitor. And this must be Kira, Dominic said, kneeling down to let the dog sniff his hand. To Sierra's surprise, Kira immediately took to Dominic, pressing her head against his hand for pets. She likes you, Sierra said. She's usually shy with strangers. Animals can sense things about people, Dominic said, scratching behind Kira's ears with obvious delight. Dinner was relaxed and comfortable. Dominic praised her lasagna, asking for a second helping. They talked and laughed as if they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. There was an ease between them that Sierra had never experienced with anyone else. After dinner, they sat on her small balcony, watching the stars appear. It was nothing like the grand terrace at his mansion, but somehow it felt more intimate. I have a confession, Dominic said after a comfortable silence. Sierra looked at him questioningly. I almost cancelled tonight, he admitted. I was afraid. Of my cooking, Sierra teased. Dominic smiled but shook his head. Of how comfortable I feel with you. It's unfamiliar. Sierra understood. She felt it too, the unexpected ease, the connection that had formed so quickly between them. It was both wonderful and terrifying. I know this doesn't make sense, Dominic continued, his voice quieter now. We come from different worlds. My life is complicated, public in ways that aren't always pleasant. Are you trying to talk yourself out of this? Sierra asked softly. Whatever this is, Dominic's eyes met hers. I'm trying to give you a chance to walk away before what? Before I can't let you go, he said simply. Sierra's heart beat faster. What if I don't want to walk away? Dominic reached for her hand, his touch gentle. Then we'll figure it out one dinner at a time. As Sierra looked into his eyes, she knew she was falling for him, this complex, lonely man who had everything and nothing at the same time. It was risky, possibly foolish, but in that moment, she didn't care. One dinner at a time, she agreed, squeezing his hand. Later that night, after Dominic left with a promise to see her next Friday, Sierra sat on her couch with Kira curled beside her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. How was dinner? With your friend? Sierra smiled, trying to think of how to describe an evening that had changed everything without actually changing anything at all. Complicated, she texted back. But good. Marissa's reply was immediate. The complicated ones always are. Be careful, sis. Sierra knew she should be careful. Men like Dominic Voss didn't typically end up with women like her. Their worlds were too different, the obstacles too numerous. But as she fell asleep that night, Sierra couldn't help but think about the way Dominic had looked at her, like she was something precious and real in a world that had always felt artificial to him. One dinner at a time, she thought. We'll figure it out one dinner at a time. What Sierra didn't know was that across town, in his enormous empty house, Dominic Voss was thinking the exact same thing. The weekly dinners became a cherished routine. Each Friday, Sierra and Dominic would meet, alternating between his mansion and her apartment. They tried different cuisines, Italian, Mexican, Indian, Japanese, using food as an excuse to spend time together, to learn more about each other at our. Sierra's apartment one evening, as they sat on her small balcony sharing sushi, Dominic asked a question that had been on his mind. You mentioned wanting to open an animal rescue someday. Tell me more about that. Sierra's eyes lit up with passion. It's been my dream since I was a kid. A place for the animals nobody wants, the older ones, the ones with health issues. I'd call it Second Chance Ranch. Why that name? Dominic asked, genuinely interested. Sierra smiled softly. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Those animals, they've been abandoned or forgotten, but they still have so much love to give. Like you, Dominic said quietly. Sierra looked at him, surprised. What do you mean? You know what it's like to be overlooked, he said. To be waiting for someone to see your value. Sierra was silent for a moment. I guess I never thought of it that way, she admitted. But yes, maybe that's part of it. Have you started looking at properties? Dominic asked. Sierra shook her head. It's just a dream right now. I'd need land, proper facilities, funding, she sighed. Someday, maybe, when I've saved enough. Dominic wanted to offer his help immediately, to make her dream a reality with a single phone call. But something held him back. He sensed Sierra's pride, her need to accomplish things on her own terms. It was one of the qualities he admired most about her. Instead, he simply said, "I believe you'll do it." The simple statement of faith meant more to Sierra than he could know. As weeks passed, their connection deepened. Sierra began to see beyond Dominic's wealthy facade to the lonely boy who had grown up with everything except love. Dominic discovered in Sierra a strength and authenticity he'd never found in his privileged world. At his house one evening over Indian takeout, Dominic opened up about his father. "He was a brilliant businessman, but a terrible father," he said, his voice tight with old pain. "Nothing I did was ever good enough. Every achievement was expected, every failure unforgivable." "That must have been lonely," Sierra said gently. Dominic nodded. "When he died 5 years ago, I felt nothing, just emptiness. What kind of son feels nothing when his father dies?" "A son who never received what he needed," Sierra said, taking his hand across the table. "It's not your fault, Dominic." No one had ever absolved him of guilt before. The simple statement broke something open inside him. "I've spent my entire life trying to be what he wanted," Dominic admitted. "Even after his death, running the company his way, making the choices he would have made." "And what do you want?" Sierra asked. Dominic looked at her, his eyes vulnerable. "I'm starting to figure that out." The next week at Sierra's apartment over homemade tacos, she shared her own fears. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm too ordinary," she confessed. "My foster sisters all did impressive things. Marissa is a lawyer, Jen is a teacher with a master's degree, and Tara is a nurse practitioner. And I'm just me, cleaning cages and dreaming about a rescue that might never happen." "There's nothing ordinary about you," Dominic said firmly. "You save lives every day. You bring joy to abandoned animals. You made me laugh when I'd forgotten." "How?" Sierra smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you for seeing me." "I've never seen anyone more clearly," he replied. As autumn turned to winter, their relationship grew warmer despite the cold. They still hadn't defined what they were to each other. Friends, certainly, but the lingering glances and accidental touches suggested something more. Neither seemed ready to cross that line, both afraid of ruining the precious connection they'd built. One snowy Friday in December, Sierra arrived at the clinic to find Nancy looking troubled. "What's wrong?" Sierra asked as she hung up her coat. Nancy sighed heavily. "Mr. Peterson called. The building's been sold. We have 3 months to vacate." Sierra felt like the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. "What?" "But Mr. Peterson promised. He'd renew our lease. We've been here for 10 years. Apparently someone made him an offer he couldn't refuse," Nancy said bitterly. "Dr. Martin is devastated. At his age, starting over somewhere else." Sierra's mind raced. The clinic was more than just her workplace. It was a community fixture. They treated pets whose owners couldn't afford bigger practices in the city. Where would those people go? "There has to be something we can do," Sierra insisted. But by the end of the day, the reality had sunk in. The clinic would have to close unless they could find a new location, an affordable one, immediately. And in Pine Valley's growing real estate market, that seemed impossible. Sierra was so preoccupied that she almost forgot about dinner with Dominic that night. She texted him an apology, explaining the situation, and suggested they reschedule. His reply came quickly. "Don't cancel, you need a friend tonight. I'll bring the food to you." An hour later, Dominic arrived at her door with bags of comfort food from her favorite diner: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and apple cobbler. As they ate at her small kitchen table, Sierra poured out her worries. "It's not just the clinic," she explained. "It's what it means to the community. So many people depend on us. And Dr. Martin, he's 65. This clinic is his life's work." Dominic listened attentively. "Have you looked at other locations?" Sierra nodded. "Everything's either too expensive or too far away. And even if we found somewhere, the cost of moving all the equipment, setting up new facilities, I don't see how we can do it." "There must be a solution," Dominic said thoughtfully. Sierra sighed. Unless a miracle happens, I don't see one. Later that night, after Dominic left, Sierra couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the clinic, about all the animals and people who would be affected by its closure, and about her own dream of Second Chance Ranch, which now seemed further away than ever. What Sierra didn't know was that across town Dominic was making phone calls. As CEO of Voss Technologies, he had connections throughout the business world, including real estate. By morning he had a plan. The following week brought a strange turn of events. Dr. Martin called an emergency staff meeting, his face alight with excitement. "I have incredible news," he announced to the assembled staff. "We've been offered a new location, the old Wilson property on Maple Street. It's bigger than our current space with room to expand, and the rent is actually lower than what we're paying now." Sierra's jaw dropped. The Wilson property was a beautiful old house with extensive grounds, perfect for a veterinary practice. "How is that possible?" Dr. Martin beamed. "Apparently the owner is a pet lover who wants to support local businesses. It's being offered to us through a foundation called Second Chance Enterprises." Sierra froze. Second Chance, the name of her dream rescue. "There's more," Dr. Martin continued. "The foundation is offering a grant to cover moving expenses and new equipment, and," he paused dramatically, "they've offered to fund an expansion, a small animal rescue operation on the property." The room erupted in excited chatter. Sierra stood motionless, her mind racing. This was too perfect, too coincidental. She thought of her conversations with Dominic, of sharing her dreams with him. "Did they say who runs this foundation?" she asked quietly. Dr. Martin shook his head. "It's anonymous. All communication goes through their lawyer. But whoever they're our guardian angel." That evening, Sierra cancelled dinner with Dominic for the first time since they'd started their weekly tradition. She needed time to think, to process her suspicions. Dominic texted her. "Is everything okay?" "Just not feeling well," she replied, the lie sitting uncomfortably in her chest. The next day, Sierra did some research. Second Chance Enterprises had been incorporated just 3 days earlier. The lawyer handling the foundation was from a firm that frequently represented Voss Technologies. That night, she drove to Dominic's house unannounced. The security guard recognized her and let her through without calling ahead. When Dominic opened the door, his smile of pleasant surprise quickly faded as he saw her expression. "Sierra, what's wrong? Did you buy the building?" she asked without preamble. Dominic hesitated, and in that moment Sierra knew. "You did, didn't you?" she pressed. "You created a fake foundation to save the clinic and—" "What? Fund my dream? Make me indebted to you?" "Sierra, it's not like that," Dominic said, stepping back to let her into the foyer. "I was trying to help." "I didn't ask for your help." Sierra's voice rose with emotion. "I told you about my dream because I trusted you, not because I wanted you to swoop in and fix everything with your money." "I wasn't trying to fix you," Dominic said, his voice tight. "I care about you. I wanted to help. By lying to me, by going behind my back?" Sierra shook her head, tears threatening. "Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? Like I'm a charity case? Like I can't do anything on my own?" "That's not how I see you at all," Dominic protested. "Then why the secrecy? Why not just offer to help directly?" Sierra demanded. Dominic ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Because I knew you'd say no. You're so independent, so determined to do everything yourself. I thought if it came through a foundation, that I wouldn't." "Figure it out?" Sierra interrupted. "That I'd just accept this miracle without question?" "I didn't think it through," Dominic admitted. "I just wanted to make you happy." "By controlling the situation," Sierra said sadly. "Just like your father would have done." The words hit Dominic like a physical blow. He stepped back, his face pale. Sierra immediately regretted the comparison. "I'm sorry. That was unfair." "No," Dominic said quietly. "You're right. I did what I've been trained to do. Throw money at problems, maintain control. I didn't consider how it would make you feel." Sierra took a deep breath, trying to calm her emotions. "I'm grateful that you care enough to want to help, but this isn't what I wanted from you, Dominic." "What did you want?" he asked, his voice strained. "I didn't want a man to rescue me," she said, her eyes meeting his. I wanted you to sit at the table with me, not stand over it. The metaphor wasn't lost on Dominic. He had positioned himself as the benefactor, not the partner. What happens now? He asked. Sierra shook her head. I don't know, I need time to think. She turned to leave, then paused. What about the clinic and Dr. Martin? The offer stands, Dominic said firmly. That's not conditional on us. The community needs that clinic. Sierra nodded, a mix of gratitude and lingering hurt in her eyes. Thank you for that, at least. As she drove home, tears finally spilled down her cheeks. She had fallen in love with Dominic. His quiet strength, his vulnerability, the way he listened to her, as if her words mattered. But this grand gesture had exposed the vast gulf between their worlds. He solved problems with money and power. She solved them with hard work and determination. Could those differences ever be reconciled? For the first Friday in months, they didn't have dinner together. Sierra's apartment felt emptier than it ever had before. Even Kira seemed to sense her sadness, resting her head on Sierra's lap as she sat on the couch, staring at her silent phone. Across town, Dominic stood alone on his terrace, looking out at gardens that suddenly seemed meaningless without Sierra to share them with. He had made a terrible mistake, treating her like all the other problems in his life, something to be solved with wealth and influence. He had tried to give her everything when all she had wanted was his respect. As the weekend passed with no communication between them, both Sierra and Dominic faced the same painful question. Had they lost something precious before it had truly begun? A week passed, then two. Sierra threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. The news about the clinic's miraculous new location had spread through the community, bringing joy and relief to their patients and their owners. Only Sierra knew the truth behind the miracle. You've been quiet lately, Nancy observed one afternoon as they restocked supplies. Everything okay? Sierra forced a smile. Just tired. Nancy gave her a knowing look. It's about a man, isn't it? The one you've been having dinner with. Sierra's surprise must have shown on her face because Nancy chuckled. Small town, honey. People notice things. Especially when it involves Dominic Voss picking up a veterinary assistant in his fancy car. Sierra sighed. It's complicated. Love usually is, Nancy said simply. I didn't say anything about love, Sierra protested weakly. Nancy just smiled. You didn't have to. That Sunday at Linda's house, Sierra couldn't maintain her facade of normalcy. As they washed dishes after dinner, Linda gently pressed for the truth. Something's bothering you, Sierra. I haven't seen you this down since Kira needed that emergency surgery. Sierra's eyes filled with tears. I met someone, and I thought it might be something real. What happened? Linda asked, her voice gentle. Sierra explained about Dominic, about their weekly dinners, about how they'd connected despite their different worlds, and then about his attempt to help that had felt like charity. He was trying to solve my problems with money, Sierra concluded, as if I'm just another business transaction. Linda dried her hands on a kitchen towel, considering her words carefully. When you were 14 and first came to live with me, do you remember how you refused to let me buy you new clothes? Sierra nodded, surprised by the change of subject. I didn't want handouts. You'd been taking care of yourself for so long you couldn't accept help, Linda continued. It wasn't about the clothes. It was about your pride, your need to prove. You could handle everything alone. This is different, Sierra insisted. Is it? Linda asked gently. From what you've told me, this man cares for you deeply. He saw a problem that was breaking your heart, and he used the tools he had, yes, his money and influence, to try to fix it. Not to control you, but because he couldn't bear to see you hurting. Sierra hadn't considered it from that perspective. The question isn't whether he should have done it, Linda continued. The question is, what was his intention? Was it to make you dependent on him? Or was it an act of love from someone who doesn't know how else to show it? Sierra thought about Dominic's face when she'd confronted him, not defensive or angry, but hurt and confused. He genuinely hadn't understood why his gesture had upset her. Maybe we're both right, Sierra said slowly. Maybe he was trying to help, but in a way that took away my agency. Relationships are about finding middle ground, Linda said wisely. If you care about him, maybe it's worth having that conversation. Sierra nodded, but uncertainty still gnawed at her. What if we're just too different? He lives in a world where problems disappear with a phone call and a check. I can't live like that, always being the one who needs rescuing. Then tell him that, Linda said simply. If he's worth your heart, he'll listen. Across town, Dominic sat in his home office, staring at spreadsheets without seeing them. The merger his board had been pushing for was moving forward, but he found he cared less and less about business matters. His thoughts kept returning to Sierra. Her smile, her laugh, the hurt in her eyes when she'd discovered his deception. His assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Voss, the board is waiting for your decision on the Jensen acquisition. Dominic nodded absently. Tell them I'll need until tomorrow. After his assistant left, Dominic swiveled his chair to face the window. The sprawling gardens of his estate stretched before him, immaculately maintained and utterly empty, just like his life had been before Sierra entered it. In the weeks since their argument, he'd respected her request for space. No calls, no texts, no accidental deliveries. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Harder than taking over the company after his father's death. Harder than any business negotiation. He'd never imagined that loving someone would mean letting them go, even if temporarily. Loving someone. The thought stopped him. Was that what this was? This ache in his chest? This constant preoccupation with her happiness? Yes, he realized. Somewhere between Thai food on fine china and homemade pie on her small balcony, he had fallen in love with Sierra Bennett. Not with her beauty, though she was beautiful to him. Not with her simplicity, though her uncomplicated life fascinated him. But with her strength, her compassion, her ability to see him as a person, not a balance sheet. The realization both terrified and liberated him. His phone rang. His sister, Catherine, the only family member he was still close to. "You sound terrible," she said after he greeted her. "Thanks," he replied dryly. "Is this about the clinic woman? The one who didn't fall at your feet when you tried to buy her happiness?" Dominic winced. He'd confided in Catherine about the situation, and she'd been predictably direct in her assessment of his mistake. "Her name is Sierra," he said. "And yes, it's about her." "Have you apologized yet? Properly, I mean. Not one of those non-apologies like Dad used to give Mom." Dominic sighed. "I've given her space, like she asked." "Space is good," Catherine agreed. "But eventually, you have to make a move. Show her you've changed, that you understand what went wrong. And if she doesn't want me back," Catherine's voice softened, "then at least you'll know you tried. But Dom, from everything you've told me about this woman, I think she's worth the risk." After they hung up, Dominic stood at his window for a long time, thinking. Sierra had changed him, shown him a different way of seeing the world. Not as a series of problems to be solved with money and power, but as relationships to be nurtured with time and understanding. He wanted, no, needed, to show her that he had listened, that he could be the man she deserved. An idea began to form in his mind. Meanwhile, Sierra was struggling with her own decisions. The clinic staff had toured the new location, the old Wilson property, and it was even more perfect than they'd imagined. Dr. Martin had shown her the area he envisioned for her rescue operation, his eyes alight with excitement. "It's your dream, Sierra," he'd said. "We can make it happen." Sierra had smiled and nodded, but inside she was conflicted. Could she accept this gift, knowing where it came from? Could she build her dream on a foundation laid by Dominic, even if they never spoke again? The questions haunted her as she walked Kira one evening. The dog seemed to sense her distraction, pausing to look back at her with concerned eyes. "I don't know what to do, girl," Sierra admitted. "I miss him." When she returned to her apartment, Sierra found herself taking out the ingredients for apple pie. Cardamom for the crust, Granny Smith apples, cinnamon and sugar. The familiar routine soothed her, and as she worked, she thought about what Linda had said. What had Dominic's intention been? Not to control her, she believed, but to make her happy. He had used the tools available to him, his wealth and connections, the same way she used her skills with animals or her homemade pie. They were just different languages of love. The realization didn't erase the hurt, but it softened it. Perhaps they weren't too different after all. Perhaps they just needed to learn each other's languages. As the pie baked, filling her apartment with its comforting aroma, Sierra made a decision. Tomorrow she would call Dominic. They would talk, really talk, about expectations and boundaries, about giving and receiving, about finding that middle ground Linda had mentioned. But the next morning brought a surprise. When Sierra arrived at the clinic, a delivery was waiting for her, a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. No note, no indication of the sender. Inside she found a business card with the Second Chance Enterprises logo and her name printed as Director of Operations. Beneath it was a key and a small envelope. With trembling fingers, Sierra opened the envelope and found a handwritten note. "Sierra, the building is yours, not a gift, but an investment in your dream, one I believe in completely. The foundation will provide initial funding, but all decisions will be yours alone. I've legally removed myself from any control. I made a mistake. I didn't understand that what you needed wasn't for me to solve your problems, but to support you while you solved them yourself. I miss our dinners. I miss your laugh, your stories, the way you see the world. I miss you. The table's still set, if you want to come back. This time I promise we'll sit at it together, Dominic." Sierra read the note 3 times, her heart racing. He had given her exactly what she needed, not a handout, but a partnership. A chance to build her dream on her own terms, with support rather than control. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sierra could barely focus on her work, her mind constantly returning to Dominic's note. By evening, she had made her decision. She drove to Bangkok Kitchen and placed an order. Pad Thai with extra peanuts, spring rolls and mango sticky rice. Their original meal, the one that had started everything. As Sierra waited for the food, the sky darkened with storm clouds. By the time she left the restaurant, rain was falling in heavy sheets. She didn't care. Some things couldn't wait for better weather. At the gates of the Voss estate, Sierra hesitated only briefly before pressing the intercom button. The gates opened immediately, as if she had been expected. By the time she reached the front door, Sierra was soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her face, the takeout bag clutched protectively against her chest. Rain dripped from her clothes, forming a puddle at her feet as she stood on the doorstep. The door opened and there was Dominic. He looked different somehow, his eyes tired but warm, his expression open and vulnerable. He wore simple clothes, jeans, and a t-shirt, as if he'd been lounging at home rather than working. For a moment they just looked at each other, the rain pounding on the roof above them. Then Sierra held up the takeout bag, on which she had written both their names in black. "Marker, you still hungry?" she asked, her voice caught between a laugh and a sob. Dominic's face transformed with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Only for you," he said softly. He stepped back, inviting her in, and this time, Sierra knew she was entering as an equal, not a guest to be impressed, not a charity case to be helped, but a partner to be cherished. In the dining room, the table was set for 2, just as it had been that first night. But there was a difference. Instead of her takeout food, plated on fine china, there were 2 simple place settings and a candle burning in the center. "I was hoping you'd come," Dominic said, taking the wet bag from her hands and setting it aside. "I would have waited as long as it took." Sierra looked up at him, suddenly aware of how drenched she was. "I must look terrible." Dominic shook his head, his eyes warm with affection. "You've never looked more beautiful to me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he gently brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I was trying to make you happy the only way I knew how, but I'm learning there are better ways. And I'm sorry I overreacted," Sierra replied. "I'm not used to accepting help. It makes me feel vulnerable." "We can learn together," Dominic suggested. "You can teach me how to support without controlling, and I'll teach you how to receive without losing yourself." Sierra smiled, feeling the last of her doubts melt away. "I'd like that." Dominic took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "Where do we start?" Sierra looked at their entwined fingers, then up at his face, this complicated, caring man who had upended her orderly life and opened her heart. "We start with dinner," she said, "and this time We both bring something to the table. Outside, the storm continued, rain lashing against the windows. But inside, in the warm glow of candlelight, Sierra and Dominic had found shelter in each other, two people from different worlds who had somehow created a new world together, one meal at a time. As Dominic unpacked the takeout bag, his fingers brushed against hers, sending a familiar warmth through her body. This time neither of them pulled away. "I love you," he said quietly, the words simple but profound. "Not because you need me or because I can do things for you, just because you're you." Sierra felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "I love you too," she replied, "not because of what you have, but because of who you are when no one's watching, when it's just us." Dominic smiled, and in that smile Sierra saw their future, not a fairy tale of rescued princesses and wealthy princes, but something real and honest, a partnership of equals who recognized each other's strengths and accepted each other's weaknesses. "To second chances," Dominic said, raising his glass. Sierra touched her glass to his, "and to dinners for two." Outside, the rain began to ease, the storm passing as quickly as it had arrived, but neither Sierra nor Dominic noticed. They were too busy savoring the meal and each other's company to worry about the weather. Some storms, after all, were worth getting caught in.